right, now turning away from the health bill, we can keep up with that on tarpley.net and on this program in coming weeks, because this constitutional struggle will certainly go on. We have this shiver in the bond market, a frisson in the wake of the health bill, which of course does increase the deficit for whatever that's worth. We have a sudden rise in the interest rates on the U.S. Treasury paper. There's been a couple of Treasury auctions, 3 of them this past week. We had a $44 billion auction of 2-year notes on Tuesday, a $42 billion auction of 5-year notes on Wednesday, and a $32 billion auction of 7-year notes on Thursday. And all of these interest rates are going up, meaning that the price at which people are willing to buy these is going down, right? The price and the interest rate move in opposite directions, as as the manuals tell us. So now the yield on the 10-year note is up to 3.9%, which is about the highest it's been since the autumn of 2008. So we've got now a situation where the Greek fear, the fear that we had seen in Greece, Spain, Ireland, Italy, the vulnerable flank, Mediterranean flank, if you will, of the euro, this is now spreading. And, of course, we got to look for the hedge funds. We've got to look for Soros. We've got to look for Goldman Sachs, Bank of America. All those companies that you bailed out are now speculating against U.S. government paper. It is a speculative attack or bear raid, economic warfare against the United States government by this gang of international hedge fund hyenas and pirates, bandits, and thieves. So don't worry about Moody's and Standard & Poor's. Moody's and Standard & Poor's should be in jail based on their criminal, corrupt practices exposed in 2008 when all those stocks and bonds that they said were wonderful investment-grade securities turned out to be derivatives-based junk. Now, we're going to have a situation where either the U.S. government will wrap up, roll up, shut down Soros, Goldman Sachs, Moody's, Standard & Poor's, or Moody's, Standard & Poor's, Goldman Sachs, and Soros will drive the U.S. government into bankruptcy. So you choose. Which side are you on in that one? Don't tell me anti-government. Take a stand against Wall Street, because that's the heart of the problem. Now, let's try to run through some foreign policy stuff quickly. We have this big flap between Obama and Netanyahu, a very acrimonious meeting at the White House, right? Obama making him cool his heels there for a couple of hours, a meeting, and then Obama saying, I'm walking out of this meeting now. Call me if you have anything new. The basic demand is that Obama says to Netanyahu, you should stop these settlements being built in the occupied territories. Now, in terms of the legal situation, it's clear. The settlements being built in the occupied territories seized, attributed by most of the international consensus to a future Palestinian state, are illegal. That part is clear. It's also clear now that we've got this diplomatic row, acrimonious situation between Obama and Netanyahu also personally. We had Hillary go to AIPAC, where she demanded sanctions against Iran that would bite. So she's kowtowing to AIPAC. The U.S., however, in practice has weakened the demand on the Iranian sanctions because otherwise they won't get it through. The Russians and Chinese will not support any measures against Iranian shipping on the high seas, nor will they support a blockade of commercial aviation. So those have been dropped. Now, what's going on here? On one level, it's clear the U.S. wants to assemble a Sunni Arab bloc against Iran, starting with Saudi Arabia, including the Gulf Cooperation Council, right, the various Emirates, Kuwait, Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Qatar, the Yemen, the Sultan Qaboos down there in the bottom of the Gulf. Anyway, this collection, if they could add Jordan, if they could add Egypt, if they could add Syria. Remember back in the the days of the Iraq Study Group in 2006, the James Baker Lee Hamilton Group. They essentially said, let's try to peel off Syria. James Baker said, I can get you Syria anytime you want. I've done it. I got them into the coalition in the first Gulf War. So in order for this to happen, in particular regard to Syria, if you want to split Syria from Iran, up to now allied, you got to make concessions to Syria on the Golan Heights, and that means the Israelis have got to cough up those concessions. They've got to make concessions to Hamas. They've got to make concessions to the PLO. So it's not the idea that the U.S. is going for a peace process, but for a revamping of the war coalition, relying on Arabs and Sunnis in particular to take up the cause and the fight against the Iranians. Now, that's clear enough. Inside this, however, there's something even more sinister, which is the old breakaway ally scenario, which is the idea that in the middle of a big diplomatic brouhaha, a big row, a big flap, the Israelis finally take up the attack on Iran. They launch a surprise attack on Iran sometime this spring. Watch out for the dark of the moon every month. That's the time when this is likely to happen. And the U.S. at that point says, well, we have not been involved. We have plausible deniability. We didn't do it. Don't blame us. But since the Middle East is now in warfare, we've got to come in on the side of Israel. So it's a way to provide some plausible political cover for the U.S. Administration. And I think that is now a real danger. The question of the attack on Iran is now back on the front burner. The Green Revolution, the Mousavi, Rafsanjani, CIA, people power coup inside Iran is obviously failing, and this now brings back the question of a direct attack on Iran. So the junking of the Obama-Brzezinski foreign policy innovations and going back to an attack on Iran, but of course now an attack on Iran with the main target being China, the idea being if Iran is attacked, they block Hormuz, they prevent the tankers from passing through the Gulf, and that cuts off 20 to 25% of all of Chinese oil. No oil for China from Iran, from the Gulf, from the Emirates, from Saudi Arabia, or anybody else. So that's the situation there. Between China and the United States, continuous deterioration. Google is now leaving the mainland. They think that they can maintain a server in Hong Kong. You can't do that because Hong Kong's an integral part of China, boys, and that will be shown to you. Remember, Google, essentially an arm of the United States government in a public cohabitation with the National Security Agency, an arm of the U.S. intelligence community from the very beginning, despite their hypocritical posturing about censorship and doing no evil. They do evil all the time. They are an engine of censorship against things that the U.S. government and Wall Street do not like. We've also got this interesting Chinese report on human rights in the United States. That's some interesting reading. And we are on track towards April 15th, the Ides of April, which is when it is likely that the U.S. Treasury will label China as a currency manipulator, simply because China wants to have a fixed parity, or more or less fixed parity. They're piloting a peg of the Chinese RMB, renminbi, yuan, with the U.S. dollar. In this context, we have the interesting remarks of Commerce Minister Chen, who says if there's a trade war between the United States and China, the U.S. will lose. The U.S. will be hurt very badly. True. Certainly in the case of a trade war, both sides would suffer grievous losses. So I would say that's fine, and indeed we welcome the increased assertiveness and plain speaking of China in this regard. I do have a couple of bones to pick with Chen, which I'll get back to here in our last segment on World Crisis Radio.